Okay, call to order.
All right, call the meeting to order, April 10th, 2019. Natural Resource Committee. And as you suggested, since we might be waiting for a few people, we can go ahead and move the presentations to now and save the elections for afterwards if more people show up.
Cool.
Yeah. Everybody's fine? Yep.
Okay, I'll introduce and so this evening we got a presentation on the updates to the Stormwater Master Plan. I believe we had a presentation about the status of it about a year ago, maybe? So we'll see how far it's progressed and this is Bob Balgos and Alita Froman Goodrich and John Lewis is here tonight. Kick it off.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
First off, I'll say good evening and thank you for you guys to join us here today. My name is Bob Balgos. I'm new project engineer for the city, and I've been working with a consultant here, Brown Caldwell, to deliver this stormwater master plan. This process has been ongoing, and we're just looking forward to. We're excited to get the tail end of this for adoption. So a little bit of background of this stormwater system. As you may know, Oregon City is rich in natural system or resources and has a lot of many natural areas where are within the city that stormwater system contributes to those. City is responsible for maintaining the network of stormwater infrastructure and protecting water quality, which feeds into these natural systems. And three components of these stormwater infrastructure systems is what you see above. First is the conveyance infrastructure, which is your pipe networks that includes your pipes and your stormwater facilities, such as your manholes, catch basins, ditch inlets, etc. Oregon City has 120 miles of pipe conveyance systems, and as you may know, Oregon City is one of the older cities in the state of Oregon. So being one of the older cities also means we have aging infrastructure, which is reaching its end of useful life. Another component of this stormwater infrastructure system is the management facilities that includes ponds, roadside ditches, roadside swales, and the natural systems that you see up there, such as the Willamette River, Clackamas River, and tributary areas. A little bit of background. Like all utilities, stormwater program needs a guiding plan, determining how to effectively manage the system. So we, as a city, is developing the Storm Master Plan to provide stormwater priorities over the next 10, 15 years. Our current master plan was developed in 1988, which is, to do the math, over 30 years ago. And I think it's time for a new master plan. That's why we're here. And in between, there were a few focused basin master plans that are focused on each basin that have constant plans dated in 1997 that included South End, Caulfield, and Park Place, which focus on infrastructure needs for the developing areas. So the Stormwater Master Plan will address flooding and capacity, water quality in compliance with the NPDES MS4 permit for discharge into rivers and waterways. Also addressing natural systems for looking at erosion problems, so sloughing banks or degrading natural channels. Also looking at maintenance to extend the infrastructure to its full capability of life. And like I said before, the aging system replacement and putting all this together and hopefully to put a list of capital projects and prioritize them based on emergency needs and priority. Next slide, kind of just going over planning context. So there's a few drivers here. One of the regulatory drivers is we're required required element of, this is one of the stormwater master plan is a required element of the city's comprehensive plan. City's also committed to the city's NPDES MS4 permit. I'm sure this group knows what those acronyms are. Okay, so NPDES stands for National Polluted Discharge Elimination System. MS4 is the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. And that's what that stands for. So I guess how will this plan be used? So this plan will be used to identify capital project priorities and define budget needs. We've got to be responsible with our funding and prioritize that correctly so the projects can be delivered. We use this plan to determine growth impacts. We're looking at with new development and finding out ways the developer will cover the capital projects or cover the cost in the capital projects specific to their needs in the development. Also looking at aligning and adjusting operations and maintenance programs and input on funding strategy. So here's kind of our process for developing a plan. Consultant first identified some known problems. Our consultant has been working with Public Works operations who have great knowledge and lots of experience and just know the system in the city. And they kind of looked at problem areas where there's areas of flooding or where residents were complaining about their stormwater. So that includes, your field investigations and your staff interviews and your public input. And they gathered all this data, and the consultant would put this into a computer program with stormwater modeling to find analysis on how to address these areas, whether to upsize or reroute a couple areas of the stormwater system, and pretty much put a conceptual level design for this. And all in all, this gets you to the put together master plan, which, like I said previously, upgrades in the capacity, replacing pipes. We have a lot of older pipes here in some areas. And also part of this is looking future ahead where there could be potential development, and we need to size them correctly now so it can accommodate for the future flows, which is the future infrastructure expansion. Also looking at outfall protections. There's some outfall areas where erosion may occur, and we just got to look at those. And most importantly, the water quality. We're compliant with the NPDES MS4 program. And so consultant put together the identified problem areas. Disregard that table that you're seeing. You can't really see it from here. That's not intent for you to see. It's just kind of what the consultant put together in the data collection, whatnot, and this kind of just shows you the map of the city's problem areas. So it views types of problems such as the flooding, infrastructure issues, the maintenance hotspots, the natural channels and outfalls to Newell Canyon. At this point, we have documented over 80 problem reports. Some may be overlapping or related locations identified by the maintenance crew and the residents' stormwater complaints. So our consultant has built some computer models to analyze these problems, and others to gather field or to conduct field visits for further investigation. So as you notice, 80 problems, that's more problems reports than the city can tackle all at once. So it is in our best interest to kind of look at areas where there's a clump of failing infrastructure and hope to tackle all that at once and creating capital projects in those areas. So next slide here is kind of just overview of the Brown Caldwell's recommendations from gathering all the data and doing analysis. So one of the recommendations is to replace this deteriorating and failing infrastructure. I don't know if you may have known, the city has invested some money into funds into video inspection, which is we call CCTV, where they run cameras down to main lines of pipes and see the conditions of each pipe. This has been going on for 3 years, and we've got great results. And just shown from that data that have been around for a while, show signs of failure, partly due to clay pipes that were installed back in the day, which is now currently outdated. And the second bullet point here would be to upsize existing infrastructure to reduce flooding during storm events. There's some pipes that are undersized and just needs to be upsized to handle all the flows that are coming in. Also to install new stormwater infrastructure systems in unserved neighborhoods to reduce sanitary inflows. So prior to this MS4, the separation, the city had a combined sanitary and sewer system. So you had all these inflows coming in, and when the MS4 permit came through, there were some areas that were left behind and just still continue to have combined system. And I will show you in a couple slides down what I'm kind of talking about that some more. And another recommendation is to monitor and stabilize Newell Canyon outfalls. There's some areas where, like I said, it was eroding, and so that needs to be looked at and get some more input on that. The other is to increase water quality treatment through targeted actions and integrated projects. One project I'm thinking off the top of my head is the Clackamas Cove up there in the by the
OC Shopping
OC Shopping Center. So when that was built, water quality was not required, but there's signs now that if we have time and money, and now would be the best time to provide water quality for that shopping area. And the other is to implement the monitor of stormwater infrastructure, which is the CCTV I was talking about, and plan for future replacement because the city wants to continue this use. So putting this all together is kind of just your big outline of the proposed capital projects. You notice kind of spread out through the city here. This is not to say this includes all the 80 plus reports that we saw, but this is the projects where I was talking about earlier when we look at spots where there's multiple failures in a certain location, and we just want to combine them as a separate capital project. And these are your big spots here, and these also have higher needs and need attention quicker than those other areas where it's kind of scattered throughout the city. So a couple examples of capital projects. Here is the John Adams Basin capacity improvement. In color there is just denotes different color, different sizes of pipes based on the modeling that the Brown Caldwell did to handle the flows that are coming in now. Right now it's undersized at the moment. And so this project will address two objectives. One is the capacity due to undersized pipes. There's surcharge going on, and what happens when there's surcharge and when the stormwater system gets filled up, it only goes up one way, and that's going usually through catch basins, and those will run through probably streets and create flooding, and which is the other objective to address here. And some areas or some parts in this area, some pipes are in people's property, and so we want to move the infrastructure into the right of way so that our operations can maintain that much easier. Another project that I was looking at was
Just quick, if you don't mind, can I ask a
Sure.
question?
No, sure,
Yeah,
sure.
like, so on the last slide on that, so what kind of timeline would that kind of project take? I'm just out of curiosity.
So the next steps after adopting the stormwater master plan would be then to do a rate study
Okay.
and system development
I see.
charge study.
Okay, so
to
there's
see how-
more steps before
Yeah,
actually doing the work.
to see
Okay.
what kind of funding would take to actually build the capital improvement program
Okay.
and the programs that support all the stormwater management.
Cool. Thank you.
So yeah, just another project that we looked at. One of the capital improvement projects is, if you notice in green, is where the existing sanitary sewer pipe is, where I was talking about earlier, there's a combined system where storm and sanitary goes to. Well, this neighborhood was kind of left out at that time, and all it has now is currently is that sanitary sewer. So where you see those green green boxes there are the catch basins. So all this street runoff is going into the sanitary line right now and creating inflow. And so to prevent that from happening, we want to create in the thick red line the storm system that can help get those in the correct system and flow down to the streams after it's treated. A couple of recommendations that Brown Caldwell would like to also give is to continue that stormwater system video inspection, which is the CCTV. The more data we get, the more we can react to it if it's failing. And it's a good data collection that we have going on with that. Infrastructure replacement program. So this is kind of separate for the CIP projects. These are the areas where scattered areas in the city where at just a length of pipe or something that was failing. We don't want to really create a capital improvement project on that. It's more of like a long-term approach to it, and we just pick this up. A couple of those probably per year for the next, I don't know how many years now, 10, 15 years. So that will be that replacement program. Another recommendation is to initiate the outfall inspection study for Newell Canyon. Continue on that and ultimately develop a funding strategy and for the prioritized CIP schedule. So all that do, any questions?
The question is to maybe kick it off.
Okay.
Maybe I missed it, but, so currently the storm system is a combination of pipes and ditches and things that are open to daylight, right? Throughout the city. Would this project, or at least with this plan update, eventually recommend that some of those streams be piped, or would that be not within the scope of the project? Just wondering.
I don't think any
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
development of the master plan identified streams that
Or-
would be piped.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that wasn't,
Yeah.
that I know of. That was,
Okay.
I mean, obviously, undeveloped land
Yeah.
in those
Right.
areas
Yeah.
would be piped, but yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think, none of our, we've got 15 streams across the city, and, they're mature streams with development around them. We're not proposing piping anything like that.
I was just thinking those rare situations where the roadside ditch is the conveyance for the, typical county road, and sometimes that's identified as a stream. It's rare. It's like there's a very few Title III streams that are actually ditches, and they kind of like, well, what is it? Is it stormwater conveyance, or is it actually a water resource? And I think the code is not super clear on what the distinction is. At least in the Natural Resource Overlay District code is not super clear on that. So that's why
There
I
may-
asked the question.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you're talking ditches, south end, for instance?
Yeah,
Yeah, right,
that
south
is
end.
one
There's one
that
project
has
for
been looked at. There is one
Yeah.
capital improvement project on the South End Road
Yeah.
for one of those ditches.
Yeah.
because the capacity is deficient.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question. Would there be any coordination with Metro Park on the Newell Creek property? Any changes that occur there? How they might influence, the new park that's being developed and their infrastructure? I don't know. I mean, I assume it's just an open stream through there where the stormwater goes through.
Yeah, currently there is an outfall on that property.
So that's a pipe that just empties
Yes.
water into the existing creek?
Yep.
Okay.
And so all of the Newell Creek outfalls, part of one of the programs is to start monitoring those and prioritizing and identifying projects with the highest priorities with the funding that can be allocated towards those programs. So, because those are the outfalls that the city is having the most degradation of, primarily because of the soils in that Newell Creek area.
I remember about 2 or 3 years ago, Metro did the day use area site plan for the area within the city. And then part of that application included their long-term restoration strategy for the entire area, some of which is in the city and some of which is in the county and all owned by Metro. And I think it talks about stormwater to some extent, and they did look at it, but it would be good to go back and look and see.
Yeah, I just
how
heard
that
a presentation
coordinated.
by them and, but the information was pretty sparse, so.
Yeah. So.
Maybe I'll just add, kind of separate from the master plan, just because I know some of you are newer and might not know the history of our stormwater program, and I'm not going to go deep history. I would just say that out of all our utilities, the stormwater program is the newest. Right? We've had a water utility for a long time. A sewer utility came around in the 80s, and then stormwater came thereafter. We obviously also on your utility bill, you'll see a pavement maintenance fee. That's probably the newest, quote, utility. But with regard to stormwater, it's still a fairly new program. I mean, I think in terms of city utilities, we used to be a combined system. So it used to be our stormwater and wastewater all ran in the same pipes. And back in the 80s, the city went through a program like many cities did in that time frame and did a sewer separation project. So we built new sewer lines and connected all those service lines to the new sewer pipes. And then left, for the most part, our storm drainage system in Oregon City, especially in McLaughlin neighborhood, is that old sewer system. So in the McLaughlin neighborhood, some of those storm sewer pipes are definitely older than our sewer pipes. They're some of our oldest infrastructure, right? So I think that's important for you to know, because our capital list is probably would be more robust than it would be hard for us to even manage manage that much project load if we were to take on all the needs of the city and try to fix all those. It's a pretty big ask. So we've got a big kind of a pipe liability need there, and some of that will show up. I think we took a reasonable approach in the master plan to kind of take some of those on over time. Then there's those areas that are, so those are just kind of aged infrastructure. And then there's the just pipe sizes that are too small that we're going to need to take on and deal with. But there's also a lot of program stuff, right? In Oregon City, we've got a lot. So in many of your neighborhoods, less so in, say, the McLaughlin neighborhood, more so in those newer neighborhoods, or those neighborhoods that were built after probably the 80s and 90s. We started putting in detention ponds. So most of the neighborhoods that you go into, you'll find these detention ponds, and we manage all those. Some cities require a neighborhood association to manage those. In Oregon City, we manage those. And we do that I mean, we have staff that oversee kind of the harder work or the, clearing them out, getting debris out of them, keeping, a lot of the starter trees that have just kind of popped up. We try and keep those cut back, but we've used contractors to do most of the kind of quote landscape maintenance because the neighborhoods have kind of come accustomed to those looking more urban design standards, right? They still might be treed and have shrubs around them, but if they get overgrown and start looking too natural, then we get complaints about those. So we manage those monthly, pretty much. We're out and dealing with those. And it used to be that those were all about just stormwater detention, holding that water back so that it wouldn't just rush to flood things, right? And now we've changed that quite a bit. We've got adopted, and I think we brought these to the Natural Resource Advisory Committee when we adopted, in 2015, we adopted stormwater design standards. And in that, there was a lot of what we call low impact development tools. So infiltration swales, just straight swales that were landscape swales. So we manage a lot of that. I don't remember the acreage or the number of sites now, but there's a lot of them. And so that's all part of your stormwater program. And the thing that has been overlooked, I think, in Oregon City is these outfalls. So development happens, they build a pipeline that takes it to the edge of the canyon, and in Newell Canyon, it's becoming obvious that there's some real problems in there with incised ditches and things. So that's where this program, there's also a question about how to really fix some of those when you're not wanting to go in and disturb the natural habitat there, but yet you've got, some significantly incised channels. So we're going to, the part of the recommendation of the Stormwater Master Plan is to not just, we don't know enough about those. So we need to start learning more about those and walking those and getting more familiar with those. So that's a big part of this program. And all combined, I mean, I think what should be important to this committee of any, I mean, water is probably not as important to the Natural Resource Advisory Committee, nor is sewer, unless we're having sewer overflows and backups and things that cause property damage. But stormwater is really where the sweet spot that I would think the Natural Resource Advisory Committee is going to be in. And I think we would like to think that the Natural Resource Advisory Committee is an advocate for kind of keep dealing with some of these problems. And that, I think, is where we're going to need some help when we start implementing this plan and trying to get the city commission and really the community wrapped around the idea of funding those things. Because right now it's a little bit like some of the other programs in the city, like parks maintenance, for instance, where we've got a lot of deferred maintenance in the stormwater program. So that's going to be a tough ask, I think. And we've yet to see kind of the bottom line of what this capital plan really means. But we'll see it first in the stormwater, the plan itself, when we see those capital project lists. And then that'll all be packaged up and sent to more of a financial analysis where we'll look at, well, how do we fund that? What's a reasonable ask? And, do we fund it using rates? Because a lot of these projects are more attributed to the existing customers that are in the city today. Or should they be funded by new development through system development charges? So that's all going to come back. I don't know how much of that we'll bring back to, we probably should bring that back to the Natural Resource Advisory Committee, especially if we want your help to kind of help deliver that message to the city commission. So, yeah.
How do you prioritize your projects? I know you were kind of mentioning you try to like bundle projects that are close together and kind of do them all at once. But when you have that list of, I think 13 that you showed up there, how do you make your recommendation for this one's more important than that one?
So that's a good question. It's a tricky question. What we're finding more and more is that we need to think about areas as a whole. So it's been based on funding where we've had pavement funding, we've chosen to do a street, right? And now we're recognizing that, well, there's an old water line in that street and an old sewer line and an old stormwater line. So sometimes it's a packaging of projects based on pavement maintenance or based on if the pipe is failing, obviously, we've got some pipelines that are in pretty bad shape structurally that we need to fix. So those would probably play out first. So it's usually condition assessment. If it's failing, then, we need to take it on. But lots of times we like to package them in ways that the community doesn't see them as wasteful, in that if it's a pipeline project, hopefully we're taking on that pipeline project, and it may be both, water or sewer or storm. High Street's a really good example of that. If you drove through town at all this summer, that was a bit of a war zone, but it was important to get through. We did sewer, a little bit of sewer, a little more storm, and a lot of water, and then we paved it. That works out best. And I think the more we update these master plans, we've got an update to our water master plan. Our sewer master plan is pretty new, but we're doing what we're calling a sewer infiltration and inflow plan, which is going to get a lot more specific about what sewer pipes really need to be fixed. And then the stormwater plan, having all those and having them fairly recent is going to be helpful in trying to determine priorities and how to package projects so they make sense.
I'll take a moment to apologize, and I presume you started the meeting. I'd like you to continue it if you would.
Okay, sure. No problem.
We had somebody, and I won't say who, but we had somebody that came to the Parks and Recreation Committee probably about 3 or 4 months ago, and suggesting that the property that's on Washington Street that Public Works owns across from the Abernathy Creek Park, which is under Public Works ownership, across from Oak Kruger's lumber place. Why didn't Parks take it over? I don't think there was any interest on the committee to do it because, in fact, we can't maintain the properties that we've got in the Parks Department. But I know Public Works has periodically, but particularly I think at that place it was a building burned down and you were able to procure it, and of course it is in the floodplain. Nobody else could develop it. And I know you also have I guess it's on 17th Street where you procured a piece of property there near between the railroad tracks, I guess, and the Main Street extension, that you have property there. The decision, and that I think a building was burned down or something else happened to it, and of course you can't build there again because it's in the floodplain. Of course that costs you a bit when you do it, but is the intent there for floodplain management when you procure those kinds of properties?
My recollection of both those was, yes, it was really related to floodplain management and wanting to do the right thing with the property in terms of reforestation or planting. So we planted both those sites with native species. And so my recollect was this happened before I started, Doug, which was over 16 years ago when I started. So it had already happened that they'd acquired that property near the Abernathy Bridge, the bridge that crosses the Abernathy Creek there. It's not Abernathy Bridge, but that bridge, the Washington Street Bridge, they acquired that piece of property. And I want to say that they used transportation funding to get that property. I may be wrong about that, but when I think about ownership, it is a city-owned parcel, but if you look at the color of the money, I think it came from transportation funding or a transportation funding grant. So turning it into a park is a bit of an ownership question that we have to kind of think about. And the 17th Street, no, it's not 17th. Isn't it 16th? The dead end between that piece and the little veterinarian clinic. That's come up as a question as well. And I think, we could work through that. It's city-owned property. I'm not, I think there's some parking there that we'd have to think a little bit about. But for the most part, there's no intent to do anything but utilize those for shade areas, native plantings, and flood management. Was that your question? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I know they had an intent to do some work on one of the tributaries that goes into Newell Creek where it's been problematic, called Scattering Creek. It goes through the cemetery there. And they had this big failure of a stormwater system that turned out to be 23 feet under the street, and took so much of your budget to deal with that particular problem.
Right.
And so those things come up, and you don't know when they're going to come up, and so it's very, very difficult for you to deal with those kinds of circumstances.
Yeah, but the Scatter, isn't, Bob, am I right? Is Scatter Canyon on the list of stormwater capital projects? So we haven't forgot about that, but we did have to kind of delay that. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
My only excuse is I forgot to write it on my calendar. I looked at my calendar this morning and I said, wonder if I don't have anything to do this evening. So I'm sorry for it.
No worries. Hey, at least showed up. You got here.
Thanks. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. All right, well, we push forward the presentation and postpone the election of the officers till hopefully somebody of you showed up. So I guess we will move into that.
One moment. Okay, let's see. Okay, so the bylaws state something to the effect of the election of officers are taken from the floor at the beginning of the calendar year, but we've had, some recruitment, and that has resulted in a complete committee. So that process has taken a while, but we can do that now. We have a chair and vice chair and secretary position, and so those are the three positions for officers. And the description of those positions is in the bylaws, so I won't go into that. But Doug, do you have any?
And have we ever had a secretary?
We did have a secretary up until the point where we went completely electronic. And so it's not as necessary now. The minutes, the official record of all of our meetings is video.
Video now. Mm-hmm.
And audio, and video and audio. So it's done via this system. So we don't really need a secretary, but I always advocate for a secretary position to kind of balance out the things that I hear and write down, because, I may miss things, and a secretary could potentially play a role there. So that's the only input I would offer on that. But it's not imperative that we fill the secretary position if nobody wants to take that position. But I think the other two are the critical ones. And it's normally done via consensus discussion, right? So it's pretty informal.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess does anybody
Through
want or nominate somebody for
So
chair?
right now Doug is chair and Trent's vice chair.
I would like to nominate Trent Awareness for chair.
Ouch.
Trent, how long have you been vice chair?
Since 2016, I think it was. I think it was my first meeting I got. So,
Offered the role.
yeah, it's like, all right. I don't have any qualms one way or another. I'd be
Okay.
happy to do it, or if somebody else wants to do it, jump up and say yay.
So, so you would need to coordinate with me on the agenda, before a week in advance, and then be in touch with individual members of the committee. And then you're kind of the conduit for individual members who want to put things on the agenda. They would go to the chair, and then the chair talks to staff.
Okay.
So that's kind of the procedure there, but, and then,
I think we have to formally vote on it.
Okay.
okay. So,
I guess
Forward a motion? Or Just,
Nomination, I don't know if we need a motion on
Okay.
that, and then, since it's, unless you have another nomination.
no, I would support his nomination.
Okay, I'll call a roll then. Mike Hamilton
I support the nomination. Vote yes.
and Doug Neely,
Aye.
Trent,
Aye.
Marie Holiday,
Yes.
Matt Cool.
I'm not going to be the dissenter, so yes.
All right, so congratulations, Trent.
All right.
Chair. So Vice Chair.
Okay. So now we move on to the vice chair nomination.
I'm going to nominate Matt Kuehl. He attends most of the meetings, and he's been here, so I'm nominating Matt
Since
Kuehl.
2017.
2017.
I'll second that.
Okay. Mike Hamilton,
Aye.
Doug Neely,
Aye.
Trent Warner,
Aye.
Marie Holiday,
Aye.
Matt.
I won't be the dissenter. I'll support that.
All right, that was easy.
All right.
Congrats.
Easy enough.
I will switch around your names on the roster and send that out.
Okay.
Any nominations for
We're
secretary?
going to offer up secretary.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't anybody want it? I mean, okay.
Hearing
So
none.
you're not required to put out any paper minutes?
No.
It's
No.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was looking through the website the other day, and the last one was like April 2016 or something like that.
No, I mean, we do have a transcriptionist who gets the videos, and there's a backlog.
Oh, okay.
And so once the transcriptionist sends the minutes to us, we send you the draft. And we haven't done that in a while because we haven't had any. And then you approve those draft minutes, and then that gets posted to the website for all the boards and committees. So all of the city boards and committees are using this Legistar link on the city website. So it's pretty much automated.
But during that time, they can watch the video if they want.
And
Yeah.
thank you, yes. During that time, you just can click on the link of the meeting and it'll load the video and the agenda of that meeting. So the way it works is as we go through every meeting on the agenda, I'm clicking on the individual agenda item and it timestamps it so that when the video loads later on, you can actually click on the agenda item and it'll go straight to that section of the meeting.
That's pretty slick.
As long as staff's paying attention and clicking on the thing on the agenda. So,
On the secretary's position, I've got a question, because Pete, I know every once in a while you'll bring a set of minutes up for us to approve.
right, yeah.
I'm certain that the Parks and Recreation Committee does not have that position of a secretary.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if we look at the bylaws of other committees, whether we really need it. I mean, we used to, at the city commission level, they used to have extensive minutes, and basically because of the videos, they don't really do that either.
Right, yeah. Well, I think, we can probably talk to Katie Riggs, our city recorder, and Claudia Cisneros, and talk about that. And then if it's not a big deal, we just amend the bylaws and take it out. We might expand the description of what staff is doing, because the staff description is kind of limited too when you read the bylaws too. It just says, I'm just here to set up the meeting, and there's a lot more to it than that.
You do such a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks. But yeah, I agree with you, Doug. It's probably a little misleading to have the position if it's not really doing anything. All right. Let me put that in my file and I'll talk to those guys about it and come back next meeting.
Okay, great.
I mean, amending the bylaws doesn't require a lot of, it requires action, but a recommendation and a vote by you as a committee, and then the city commission will bless the bylaws amended. And, okay.
Move on next to the comments. I've seen probably not a lot of action tonight on that one.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So next action would be old business.
All right.
talking about the Joint Planning Commission meeting on February 25th.
So in your packet, I put together a quick staff report, and we had and several exhibits. We had a meeting on February 25th with the Planning Commission here, and we discussed purpose of the NRC, how and when the NRC can comment on Planning Commission and City Commission decisions. We looked at overview of projects and accomplishments from this year and years past, probably going back about 2 or 3 years, and briefly discussed the future work plan. The notes I took from that meeting, following the staff presentation, there was a discussion, and I listed all of the things that came up as topics. That included what is the formal mechanism for developers to contact and interact with the NRC? There was also a discussion about what the thresholds ought to be for when an application for approval of a natural resource overlay district application significantly departs from the standards. And using the 2008 Clackamas Cove decision, which was a type 3 decision by the Planning Commission, where the applicant requested a reduction of the 200-foot vegetative corridor, which is the adopted vegetative corridor around the Clackamas Cove, and reducing that width to 50 feet. That was part of the original master plan, and that decision has carried through all the subsequent master plan amendments since then. And so there was concern about that and whether or not there should be additional oversight by the City Commission regarding those types of major changes. Doug, do you want to speak to that some more?
Yes. There probably are two approaches we could deal with that, and one would be the decision on the overlay was based upon a type 3 decision, which generally does not go to the City Commission unless it's appealed. And that came out of the Planning Commission. That was 2008, as I recall. That improvement was made and they reduced that 200 foot natural en-rod area that we have in the city on cell-mounted bearing streams to 50 feet. Mm-hmm. And one thing I think we talked about was the possibility that when they are considering developments in overlay districts, that it might alter the overlay districts, that the Planning Commission would actually request the applicant to actually come to us for discussion, and then we could make a recommendation to the Planning Commission that would require a code change. Mm-hmm. The other possibility would be for us, to have a code change to support that kind of decision making to be a type 4 decision, which would go to the Planning Commission and automatically go to the City Commission. I don't think that personally the last method to do it is the best method to do it. We've got really good relations with, of course, the Planning Department itself, but very good relations with the Planning Commission. And I didn't see any indication that there was opposition to the notion of actually perhaps changing the code to enable that to happen. I think we'd have to look at it if in fact it was a minor thing. Mm-hmm. If it was a minor thing that the Planning Commission could recommend specific mitigation procedures to go through to deal with that, perhaps that's not something to come before us. But when it was a major thing, like a 75% reduction in the natural resource overlay district, that maybe that's something then that by code, the Planning Commission would direct us to look at and make recommendations to them.
Yeah, okay.
The other thing that we spent some time with was the Heritage Tree Program, and had discussions about the current code on the Heritage Tree Program, which requires a person to bring in an arborist to evaluate whether the tree is diseased or poses a potential hazard. That's potentially costly, and we haven't had many applications even and when we had the old code and it had that requirement, but we did have some applications of heritage trees that were approved. And since the new code's been in place, we haven't had any. Dee Dee was very active in going to our former member here, going to neighborhood associations and talking about the program. Nancy has actually looked at the code and recommended some edits to the code. And I think we ought to take a look at that and see if we want to carry those edits forward and recommend the plan, recommend to the planning and also the planning commission to consider that particular code change. That's a code change that would naturally go to the planning commission first and then to the city commission before the code change would occur.
Yeah, trying to remember. Yeah, I think you're right. I think probably should, because even though it's not a development code per se, it's more of it's a voluntary process for nomination of trees. It's not a regulatory standard per se. I think the last time we adopted amendments to that code, it was via a resolution rather than an ordinance. So and it didn't require a lot of public notice in order to do it, just kind of standard, So it is easier to do that than it is to change the zoning code. But I agree. And Nancy, we made good progress on those edits. And so I would assume that when Nancy gets back from Hawaii, we can continue that amending process.
Might consider putting on the next agenda to take a look at the edited copy that she provided us.
Yeah.
I will say the planning director was very impressed by number one, Nancy taking that effort. And number two, to the appointment of Ms. Holliday, who you have certification or seeking certification in terms of wetland delineation?
Seeking.
So, I mean, she was very pleased, our planning director, to see that we have such a person here on our natural resource committee.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So the other things, what else was there to discuss? I think there were comments by certain commissioners about how much information they have to digest in order to render a decision, and that it's very much a balancing act of so many factors because of the way that the code is written is very, it's very long, it's very involved, and it's pretty complicated. So the process of providing a recommendation from staff, and then there's an obligation on the part of the planning commission to try to sift through all of that information and then come up with an opinion about it. So that was one of the comments. And then one of the things that is being discussed right now, because we're at the latter part of the code amendment process for equitable housing. And there's a set of recommendations that the Planning Commission have developed that for additional review outside of the code amendment process, because they're issues that really require more public involvement than the housing code did initially do. And they have to do with tree policy. And in particular, tree policy as it relates to areas that are not yet within the city, on properties that are within the urban growth boundary, and it's significant tree removal. And some people fall on both sides of this issue and feel very strongly about it. You've got one side that are, feeling that property owners shouldn't be penalized by doing something that's perfectly legal on their property under county zoning. And if they do, how does that tie into their property rights, and what does that mean? And then you've got other people that saying once that mature stand of trees is gone prior to annexation, that are it significantly changes the character of the neighborhood. But there's a lot more to it than just that, because we have very extensive mitigation requirements for development review. And if the property is intended for urbanization and has got a designation of residential or commercial or whatever, then there should be a reasonable expectation on the part of the property owner that those are the zoning regulations that they, and development regulations that they can abide by. But the concern is that unless you're if you're not in development review, you know, you can do pretty much whatever you want because it's a residential property and the county doesn't regulate tree cutting on residential property unless it's a timber zone or a resource zone or something like that. So it's been a discussion for many years now, but there was a recommendation by the Planning Commission to take a look at that policy and having a policy like that. Before we do that, though, we got to consider the wider community. So it would involve providing notice to people on the within the UGB and not just within the city area. And there was also some specific comments about how it might be possible to preserve large trees that are growing very close to or within the public right-of-way, and then as a consequence of a development application, that tree has to be removed to make way for a sidewalk or a widening of a street or something like that. And is there any way, through coordination with Public Works, that the standards for streets could be more flexible to preserve trees and have sidewalks go around them, and that sort of thing. So that's definitely something that requires coordination with Public Works. There are plenty of technologies out there like rubber sidewalks and that sort of thing that currently are not adopted Public Works standards. So if that's something that is going to be pursued and recommended by the committee, then we need to think about specific technologies and then have them and bring that up with the Public Works Department and see in what situations those are appropriate, because they may be more appropriate for local streets than they are for an arterial street, which is going to carry a high volume of traffic or something like that. But there are definitely opportunities there, and as you know, we have some pretty large white oaks that are just growing out of cement, it seems like. And, like Mount Pleasant as an example, you had 3 huge white oaks that were just growing right out of the road pavement, it seemed like. And then one day a big storm came through and blew 2 of them down. But yeah, those are the kind of things that...
Well, we do have a few examples in Oregon City where developers, in fact, had taken the sidewalk and taken and run some of our quality trees too. And so it can be done.
Next to, between the post office and Wilco, there's an example of 2 white oaks. And then there's a couple on the OC Point Shopping Center where it's not a sidewalk meander, but they've definitely made an effort to preserve those big white oaks in the south end of that shopping center there.
And I think it was early last year that Planning had organized the event for, I guess 2 years ago now, for the plantings and so forth there in along the Laughlin Promenade, and they actually had a person speaking there about white oak. And he pointed out one we have on Central Point, and they did that same thing. It's a nice big white oak, and the developers took the sidewalk around it, and I walked by it on many occasions, and it does not seem to affect anything. The tree still looks good, so I assume it's not affecting the root growth or anything else.
Yeah, so I think right now the code is pretty much written very objectively. It doesn't require that you preserve a tree. It says that if you have to remove a tree, then that tree must be mitigated. And the mitigation standards are fairly high depending on where on the property that tree falls. But, it's really a question of magnitude. You know, you get some very large, there's nothing in the code right now that requires that a large mature white oak that's growing in an area there where it could reasonably or potentially be preserved, then it has to be. It doesn't say that. So that's why the Planning Commission wanted to have that wider discussion, because they want to look at the tree policies for public right-of-way, for development property, for heritage trees, for annexation properties, and just get a much more cohesive, comprehensive point of view about it, which I think is a significant process. It won't be part of this code amendment process. It will be something we tackle most likely on the tail end of a comprehensive plan update, which is upcoming. Yeah. Is there anything else? Oh, the other thing I included in your packet was a copy of two copies of PowerPoints, one from the joint work session and then one from our work plan review. And then what we had done when we last reviewed our work plan, which is a big, messy 11 by 17 document, is we highlighted the things that we wanted to prioritize out of that work plan and put them in the 2019-21 selected activities list. And that included all the things on this list here. And then the actual work plan itself, I'm in the process of cleaning that up. I don't have that job finished yet, but I want to come back to you at the next meeting with a more workable document with all of the things on it. Is there anything on this list you wanted to talk about? So this is the fourth exhibit on the agenda item. Oh, the other part of it is, the other part of this is that the city commission goals and priorities, I don't believe have been adopted yet, because there's some discussion about what those are going to say too. And so what we try to do is align NRC's goals and priorities with the city commission's goals and priorities. So that's still a draft.
Is that something they're going to be taking care of in the near future? Or?
Yeah, I believe I was at the last meeting on April 3rd, and they were going to adopt them, but there was some last minute red lines that came up, and they wanted to postpone.
So maybe that might be a good thing to talk about next time.
Yeah, so it should be April 17th when they adopt those.
Okay.
And we can bring them to you. Yeah. All right. That's all I have, unless you have any questions for me before we go into communications.
I think this, like I said, I think let's try to get find out about the city commission goals, and then have this on the agenda for next time.
Okay.
Then we can have a good discussion about it.
Yeah.
So next spot, new business discussion items. I guess we've kind of talked about that. We'll talk about relook at the Heritage Code for next time, as well as the city commission goals and our goals for next time.
Yeah. There had been a request to have Brian Vaughn from Metro come and give us an update on the Mule Creek Canyon project, and also on the Riverwalk as well.
That'd be good.
Because there's been a lot of activity on the design side of the Riverwalk. A lot of Metro staff been in the office in the last 2 weeks, trying to get all the joint permit application to the Corps of Engineers. That's been submitted, but they're gearing up for the next phase of design. So
I saw they were doing tours of the facility. Any chance we can get a staff field
absolutely.
trip?
No, that's a good point. We can get a tour of the site. I'll and talk to Christina and Kelly and see how soon we could get on that.
That would be interesting.
Their first tours filled out really, really bad.
Yeah, so I wasn't able to get
I'll
on.
put bids in for the NRC.
All right.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Might be able to make time for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I'm going to make a request,
Yeah.
and that request is to have the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council make a presentation to this body. There's lots of things that are coming up that are actually within our watersheds, and some activities will be coming up through the next 6-year program that are rather exciting.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. See what I can coordinate. All right, so we on to communications or
Yep.
Okay.
Communications.
anybody?
Start at the end. Matt.
Nothing currently.
What is this?
So this is just kind of. So this is
Anything that you want to talk about?
It's kind of
I don't have
issues.
anything at
Get
the moment.
soapbox a little bit. If you, yeah, it's kind of like all the members have a lot going on in their lives, but oftentimes it's good because they've got fingers out in the community and they're working on projects that are related to the mission of the NRC, and it's really good conduit for communication because we're here and we're broadcasting and that sort of thing, so it's important. And then staff gives a little update on where things are at as well. So.
yeah. I unfortunately have not been around, so I'm
Busy.
I, on that, as chair of the Natural Resource Committee, did make a presentation to the Parks and Recreation Committee, and basically talking about our goals and some of the issues that we're having, but also, of course, our interest in a lot of those parks, which are natural resource areas.
Great.
Oh, that's great. When's our next? We're supposed to have a joint working session with PrAC as well, right? When is, or at least once a
Once a
year?
year, yeah. So we normally coordinate through Phil Lewis on the timing of that. And I don't know that I haven't had that discussion with him yet.
Curious of when that sort of.
When's the best time to talk to PrAC, do you think, Doug? Does it matter?
They have their meetings on the fourth Thursdays.
Okay.
And perhaps we could work out a work session either before their meetings or before ours.
Yeah. Yeah, so usually you can coordinate one of those 2 dates. Say welcome to Mike and
Yeah.
Marie. Thanks.
Thanks for appointing us.
I think
Yeah,
it's
welcome.
going to be great to have you guys on board. It's really cool that we have such a well-qualified committee. I think you're going to really help staff out in the next 3 years. I've been very busy with the code amendment process because every 2 weeks we're going back to the city commission and working out the final few housing code issues. And we're closing in on the final few. April 17th will be a big meeting because we're going to be talking about the most important issues that still need to be resolved and looking for direction on that. And then there's certain things that have been remanded back to the Planning Commission for additional discussion. The natural resource overlay code amendments, though, were not one of the controversial items. So those are moving forward as proposed. Schedule-wise, it'll probably be June, I'm guessing, I'm thinking before the final adoption because we have to have 2 readings of code. April 17th, we will get some direction from the city commission and we'll have to go and make some code changes based on that direction. And it'll probably take about two weeks to come back to the city commission with the final package of code amendments. So May 1st, they would review those and then the second city commission meeting in May, they would potentially have a first reading of the ordinance. And then there'll be a set of other things just to move forward with outside of that project. And then at the same time, we're adopting implementation code and zoning code and for the Beaver Creek Road concept plan area. So right now the Beaver Creek Road concept plan was adopted, but we neither have comprehensive plan designations for a majority of the areas that need to be annexed or will be annexed, and we don't have implementing zoning. So some of the properties out there have been in limbo for some time. And there's also a significant amount of public works and public facilities updating that needs to be done based on the concept plan because it was 2008. And so there's some costs that have changed and that sort of thing. We are engaging with Beaver Creek Hamlet and the community out there and doing a lot of public outreach. And Christina Robinson Gardner is the project manager on that. So we're busy. Yeah.
Trent, there's something else I should mention. After the last meeting, Jerry Herman called me. He indicated he was going to be late, so he has an excuse.
Yeah, I heard.
He has an excuse. He was talking about some landscaping modifications on the Cove site.
Right.
And suggesting that he bring it to our group. I recommended that he really discuss it with the developers because, first of all, as you know, they are extending replanting the area with native species well beyond the 200 feet that originally applied to the mitigation area. But I don't think we want to be put in the position of making a recommendation at all without letting the developer know whether that we're doing it. And secondly, they bought that property, they own it. And so whatever codes currently apply is what they're going to be able to do. They've been really receptive to our recommendations that we've made so far to them. And they've been very good to work with. And so I'd like to keep that up. I do have a request of Pete. I read that document that he sent out that was the approval back in 2008, and what I couldn't see in it was the actual change of the NROD, and he said that was probably another report. And I said, well, the only question I had was, did in fact a 200-foot barrier apply? Because the way the code was written, I think we said on anadromous fish-bearing streams, and I didn't know whether originally the code got included, but it did.
Yeah.
I do have a question of you, Pete, if you can bring it back.
Sure.
Whether the change from 200 feet to the 50 foot only applied to the development site, and not to the spit and not to the west side of the cove.
Okay.
If you could check that out. Because if that's the case, I think we want to reinstate the 200 feet if it's been changed on those areas, which can't be developed anyway, really.
That's right.
But I'd like to have you check on that if you would.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'll talk to John Van Staveren at Pacific Habitat Services because I think he was the one that prepared the original report back in 2008. Hopefully he's got a copy of that report. He can just email us. Otherwise, we'll pull the archive, the land use file. I have that in there. And pull.
Was that the developer in 2008, though?
A different developer, same company did doing the water resource, I believe. So, but I'll check and pull that. And I think that's where the technical analysis is in that submitted report. It's not in the staff report. Staff report's kind of a summary. It's like, so.
It's a long summary.
Funny how that works.
That was a short one compared to what we do today, but you know, it's like, yeah. Okay.
All right. I guess we talked about some future agenda items already. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about next time?
So let me go back over this. I know hopefully we'll have at least one presentation, either Metro, Mule Creek Canyon, Riverwalk, possibly both. I don't think so, but we'll be reviewing the Heritage Tree Code, it sounds like.
Yep.
We'll be discussing this 2008 decision on the Cove and hopefully, and we'll have that report ready to discuss. And I need to reach out to Greater Oregon City Watershed Council and see when they can make a presentation. And we can coordinate with them.
They will make a presentation if you ask them.
Sounds good.
And then I think the only other thing I had was the city commission goals.
Right, city commission goals and our work plan update.
Yep.
Which oftentimes it's just better to do that in a work session.
Yeah.
And a little more informal than sitting here and going through it.
Yeah.
You know, we do have to record anything that we do in the room back there. We can do that. So we are allowed to rely on an audio recording for transcripts if people are more comfortable just doing it in a more informal setting. Otherwise, you know, I'm fine here. We can work through, and it's all on video. Okay. Good. That is plenty for the next meeting.
So,
And I don't have any other reports at this point. So,
cool. All right, thanks, Pete.
thank you.
And welcome, Mike and Mary, sorry.
Mary, yeah.
Mary, yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
And yeah, look forward to this new year. So I guess even though it's April.
Yeah, I think the first priority is to get on a Blue Heron site tour, though.
Yeah, sure.
I'm actually going on Saturday. I had a little.
Oh,